Hey everybody, it's James and this is the ComedyPreneur Show, and today we have two amazing funny guys who are also entrepreneurs in their own right. They have made their own comedy albums, they have produced their own stuff. One of them actually owns a comedy album label. That's crazy. I don't know. He's like the Jay-Z of comedy, right? We're gonna get two amazing funny guys. One of them, the Jay-Z of comedy. And please welcome to the show, Mr. Ricky Glore and Mr. Glen Tickle.
Hello,
I'm not the Jay-Z.
Lovely talking with you again. Yeah, Ricky's the Jay-Z, I think.
If it was like, well, the Jay-Z of comedy, please stand up. I'm like, I'm already standing up.
Yeah. No, Glen is definitely Glen is the Jay-Z of comedy.
I don't know if that holds up, but thank you, I think. I don't know a lot about Jay-Z. I don't know if I want that title.
What? Jay-Z's the man. What are you talking about? He's the best.
I don't know that I don't know enough about him to want to say yes or no to this.
I like that you know so little that you're not even going to align with the possibilities that he could have like a track record that you're like.
That's what I'm saying. There's so many people who within the last couple of years, if somebody's like, oh, you're like this person, I would have said thank you. But
You're
now
the
it's
Bill
like, oh,
Cosby of comedy.
Yeah, like, you know what? That's not as nice as you
You're the Bill Cosby of mixologists.
Nobody.
So I don't know. I'm gonna need to like read up on Jay-Z whether I want to be associated with.
All right. So both of you guys have made comedy albums. Glen, you started a comedy label. Can you kind of give us both of your backgrounds and how that works and what the process is for creating a comedy album and what people have to do or what a comedian would have to do to even start pursuing this road or this process?
Sure. I did my album in 2016 because I started doing colleges, and some of the bookers that I was talking to were asking, they're like, well, can you send us the hour that you would perform at the college? And I didn't have like an hour long recording. Like I had 5 or 10 minute clips I was sending out. So I was like, oh, next time I'm headlining somewhere, I'll record it. And then I'm like, well, if I'm going to record it, you know, I'll do it well and I'll put it out as an album, because I've been doing comedy for 6 or 7 years at that point. So I was like, oh, like I have it now. Like I'd not been doing it for terribly long, but I'd been headlining at that point where I was regularly doing 45 minutes or an hour. I'm like, well, I know I can do it. Like, why not record it? And then it's easier for me to prove to other people that I can do it. So I did that. The next time, it was like 2 days later, actually, a venue that I perform at a lot asked me to do a headlining spot. But it was on a show that normally the headliner does like 20 minutes and there's 4 or 5 like local openers. And I told them I would do it, but I was like, I'm going to sound like I'm big timing you being a jerk, but I will only do it if I can do an hour and you have 2 openers and I get to pick them. And they're like, why? I was like, because I'm going to record it for an album. And then they were immediately on board because they'd had bands record albums there before, but never a comedian. I think other comedians have recorded albums there, but only through, like, I've produced the albums. I don't know if anybody else has. But it's Steel Stacks in Bethlehem. If things ever open up again, check it out. It's great. I love it.
And Ricky, what about you? What was your process for getting down that road to getting your album made?
It was thinking about, it was doing a 45-minute to an hour set, tightening that for about 2.5 years, which it was difficult because at first the group that I would go out with on weekends, I thought it would be a nice democracy for us to each like change up the lineup every weekend or every performance, every show. You know, if you emceed last weekend, you're featuring, and then if you featured last weekend, you're headlining, and rotate that. We did that for about 6 months, and then I was like, this is nice and this is fun. It's good to perform in all those different spots and various venues. But I'm going to have, since I'm the one booking this, I'm going to have to be selfish because I really want to work on this hour. So since I'm doing all the legwork, I'm going to make myself the headliner every time, and hopefully other comedians will be okay and want to join and do an MC and a feature spot at these different locations, because I'm also driving, so it's nothing off them, yeah, and they're getting paid. But then after doing that for a while, I knew I kind of mentally wanted to put it down somewhere to document it, to then move on to new material, to work on something else. So when thinking about putting out an album, I was like, well, I don't know how I would do that myself, as far as like the audio engineering, the distribution, and the contacts. So I Googled, and Glenn was a very highly listed article, was part of a highly listed article on Google in that search. And I read it, I listened to his album, I, stalker girlfriend YouTube to watch clips, and went to Facebook and was like, oh, I'm gonna add him as a friend, I hope he accepts. Like, and did that, and then was like, oh, I wonder if he would have any interest of doing someone else's. So then I shot him a message on Facebook and got what seemed like this Dear John letter that was pre-written. That was like, thanks, but if you read the article about me, you'll know that how easy, and you should just do it yourself. It's the best gains you get from it. If you have me do it, I would get this, blah, blah, blah. You would blah, blah, blah. And you learn so much, and once you do it yourself, you're a self-made man, you're a self-business. Be like me, kid. Like, not me, just like, and you could put together an album. I do a lot. Like, I self-book. I don't have a manager. I don't have an agent that books my regular gigs. It's me. Like stand-up, you're the writer, producer, director, star. So that's fine. As far as it came to this, I was like, I have no experience. And if I do it, I don't want it to sound bad. Anybody can record a podcast.
Right.
I didn't want it to be like that. Like, oh, I record it with my phone, or the best way I knew how, or possibly spend a bunch of money and have it not be good, or not get any kind of benefit out of it that I wanted. So then I was kind of persistent and went back to Glenn. And like a lot of times when I reach out to clubs or places that may give me their cold call response, I know that's because they get a lot of inquiries. So then my next thought was, maybe it would help if he saw me in person perform. Maybe he would be like, oh, maybe the juice is worth the squeeze. Not to pat myself on the back.
That's the exact phrase I would use.
From The Girl Next Door, right? Timothy Oliphant, is the juice worth the squeeze? So I was like, hey, I know we live far apart. You're in Jersey, I'm in Kentucky. I'm doing a show in North Pennsylvania. Would you want to feature? And I already knew I liked his comedy from listening to his album and watching clips. So it was a win-win. I got an awesome feature if he accepted. And if he liked what he saw, if I did a good enough job, which it's a lot of variables, it's a winery show. Those are a crapshoot. Luckily, the audience was awesome, which I think just makes the comedian better. You can't always blame the audience, but it's okay to sometimes blame the audience.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say you should never blame the audience. You can sometimes blame the audience.
Yeah,
sometimes it's you and them. Sometimes it's just them.
Like
sometimes
the 5 firefighters who booked me to do a show at their like dinner, but it was just the 5 of them in a big room. Like, that's their fault.
That's like step away from a snuff film.
Yeah. Like, I don't know how you thought that was going to go, but you did that to yourselves. I don't feel bad.
Well, like a winery show, like a lot of times it's not theater lighting, so the crowd is fully lit the whole time. There's always the theory of, people don't want to laugh if the people next to them can see them, what they're laughing at, and they're judged. The comedian can see them. There's a lot of variables that can make those shows not great. I thought it was a really good show.
And they were very fun. The mic kept cutting out.
Oh, yeah. Didn't we abandon the mic?
Our friend Jason Brown hosted, and he went up first, and he did the thing where he was like, I'll just talk loud. But I had a cold, and I was like losing my voice. So I'm like, I can't. Like I won't be able to make it through 20 minutes of talking if I have to talk loud enough for a big tent of people to hear me.
That Sunday, the next day when I drove back, I don't take off work ever. I got super ill that night and had to take off work Monday and Tuesday. So yeah, I was feeling the same thing. So like, and I like having a mic. But anyway, after that show, we chatted and you were like, let's talk more about the possibilities of an album. So that's how it happened for me.
How did you set up an album, or what's the big requirements for doing that, for recording an album? Because like Ricky said, you don't want to record it on your cell phone. You don't want to spend a lot of money and take it for granted. What's the biggest parts of putting together an album?
The biggest thing in terms of like investing in it was I hired a sound guy for mine, because like I did the sound on Ricky's because I wasn't the one performing, and I worked on I'm trying to think, you're the fourth I've done like full length solo album. So the other two I hired a sound guy, same guy, Jesse Gimbel. He's based out of Philadelphia. If anybody needs a guy to record things, he's tremendous. But then with Ricky's, we were doing it in Pittsburgh, so it was like travel anyway, and I'd done a few, and I've kind of slowly amassed a decent amount of like equipment in the years since I did mine. And I have like a production background. Like I went to school for films. Like I know how mics work. So I was like, well, let me try doing this one myself. And then of course we still had like tech issues with the club. But it turned out, I think, pretty good. But I think if you're looking to do it yourself, where you should spend the money is hiring a sound person, because you're the one on stage. Like you while the show's going on, you have no control over how things are sounding. Like you need to just focus on having a good show. So having somebody that you trust, like I shot a special last year and did the same thing. I'm like, as a guy with a film degree and loves making movies, like I would very much like to be the one on stage and also the one behind the camera, but that is as yet impossible. So I hired Phil Bowen from Film and Media to film it, because like, look, I trust Phil. He shoots a lot of stand-up. He knows what it should look like. So if he's there being the guy in charge of cameras, I don't have to worry about it. So, I'm sure you get sound people for various rates, but I don't know. That's where you should spend the money up front. And to Ricky's point of where I blew him off at first,
I didn't think you blew me off. I
did a little bit.
I know a cold response when I get one.
I don't get a ton. The thing is, like, probably every 2 or 3 months, somebody has that same story of like, yeah. I've been thinking about doing an album. I found your article, and I say the same thing. I'm glad it's helpful, but like the point of the article is you don't need me to do it for you. But the other albums that I produced with Tyler Rothrock and Jason Brown, for their albums, they were both like, well, no, I want it to come out on a label, right, because that's important to me. And then also all the stuff that I read in your article, I don't want to do it. Like I don't want to fill out a spreadsheet. Like, can I just do comedy? And I'm like, look, I mean, okay, yeah. It's one of those things where like when people talk about wanting to do comedy, I'm like, we'll just go do open mics. And they're like, I'm scared. Oh, right. I forgot that other people think it's scary to get up in front of people. That's just not a thing that I've ever had. Like standing up and talking doesn't bother me. But the idea of like, oh yeah, no, you just do a bunch of research and you fill out all this paperwork and then you do it. And then people are like, well, no, I don't want to do that. I just want to do the joke.
What you just said about a label, the not doing the work, yeah, I definitely didn't want to take on another hat. I didn't want to wear another hat. But for me, having a label meant also a level of acceptance, or not acceptance, but trust in someone else that was like, yes, I will have you under this thing that I represent. And so I'm acknowledging you that you are good enough to be here. Even though I pursued it, it's different than like, there's a couple comedians that I know. I mean, look, I think every comedian is delusional at some point, and I don't think that's anything you get past it. I think you have to be to keep your sanity for some part of it. But some comics are like, well, I'm going to record an album, and they record an album, and it's like, did the world need that? Well, I mean, the world doesn't need anything that I'm putting out there, but yeah, it's a little bit of the cachet, and to be like, yeah, I'm part of this album. I'm proud of this. They're proud of me. They put time behind it, even if it's not like a ton of money, you know.
It's feeling the amount of respect. It's feeling like you are respected as a comedian, that you're actually a professional, and you're getting a professional album on a professional label, and it's coming out to the world respectively. I mean, there's a lot of people who release movies or films or whatever on YouTube or Vimeo or whatever, and it doesn't, and people go, well, you just released it on YouTube, so it's not as legitimate. But that's not true either. But I understand what you're saying. You wanted a sense of legitimacy at that point. But Glenn, you started an entire label. How hard is that? And then how hard is bouncing that forward?
Not hard at all. I did it by, it was a literal joke. Like on one of the forums, because I self-released my first album. So like you were talking about, even friends of mine were like, oh yeah, well, you have an album, but you put it out yourself, so it doesn't really count. I was like, I mean, I still get checks from Circus for it. Like it's still.
I mean, they're eating crow now, but there is that stigma.
Yeah,
there is like an asterisk, but then even there's people who I like are a couple of years into comedy who I hear them talking about releasing an album themselves, and I'm like, yeah, don't do that. But only because like I give it a year or two, get better at comedy. I don't know. I think just from, like I said, having that film degree and like being an indie film snob, like the whole idea of putting stuff out yourself doesn't sound bad to me. Plus, nobody would like. I wasn't getting offers from labels I was turning down. I just didn't have another option at the time. But on one of the forms that I filled out, it says to put the name of the label, and then in parentheses it says if you don't have one, or if it's self-released, you can leave it blank, put your own name, or make something up. And I'm like, well, that one, I'm going to make something up. So I used Circus Trapeze Records because I wanted to name my first kid Circus Trapeze Tickle, and I wasn't allowed, so I used it for that. But then my album charted on Billboard, and I got an email. No, it's an email or a phone call like midnight on a Saturday, a weird time. And I didn't think it was real because they're like, hey, I forget their name, from Billboard. We just want to verify some information because your album's charting next week. And I tracked down that person's name and contact information through the Billboard website to make sure I wasn't being pranked. And then I emailed them. They're like, we'll call you. And then they were like running through, like, is this the title? Is this your name? And then when they get to the label, they're like, it says the label is Circus Trapeze Records. Is that correct? I'm like, yep. And then the following week on Billboard, it said Glen Tickle, yes, really, Circus Trapeze Records. And I was like, oh, all right, I guess I have a record label now. Because then other friends were talking about putting out labels or putting out albums themselves and like asking me for advice. And my one friend, Tyler Rothrock, was the first album I produced after mine. He's the one who's like, I don't want to do homework like for this. Just can I just show up and you record it and we put an album out? And I was like, yeah, because he was asking me a bunch of questions. I sent him the article that Ricky found, and I was like, you can do it. And he's like, I don't want to do it, so you do it, and we'll work out whatever arrangement. The big difference with doing one with Ricky is he and I don't know each other super well, or for really that long. Like, it was a year ago, maybe.
About a year ago.
The first time.
Yeah.
Because at first, like when I was working with Tyler and Jason, I've known them for as long as I've been doing comedy. So I was very upfront. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I was both sides of this. Like, I was the producer and the performer on my album the first time. So like, I couldn't really worry about screwing myself over. So I'm like, if you guys feel like I'm screwing you over, we're close enough friends that like you can just tell me and we'll like rework the deal and we'll figure it out. and then I did like a compilation album with some friends, and then but now I've had 4 or 5 like albums or specials released through the label. So I'm like, I have to stop telling people that it's a fake label and I don't know what I'm doing because it's
Yeah,
been
because Glenn
around.
said to me, he's like, I'm going to screw you. I do not know you. I am taking all of your money.
Yeah.
I
Well,
was like,
that's
all
like my
right.
big fear where I'm like, I don't want anybody that I'm working with to feel like I'm just screwing them over and taking their money. I mean, I still feel like I am just because of like how copyright law works. But yeah, to do it yourself and to do a label, basically you just tell people you have one is essentially how it works. Like I'm registered as a sole proprietorship in New Jersey. So like it's a legit business, but it's not like a big one. I don't have employees. It's just me, and sometimes I have to do spreadsheets. And as Ricky is experiencing now, like sometimes things take me longer because it's just me. Uh, and I mean now with everything that's going on, and like now my wife and kids are home all the time. Like getting time to sit down and do audio editing has been kind of at a premium. So Ricky politely like checks in every couple days to like see where I'm
I'm
at.
like, hey, do you have any jokes for my Dum Dum Basement Puppet Show?
Oh,
And
I do love writing jokes for the puppet.
So if a comedian was gonna do their own album recording and start their own process, besides going and reading that article, which is a great article, I read it, and that's actually how I found Glenn
I
as
was say, I
well.
think that's how you found me.
Yeah. So I found that article because I was looking up. I was going to help my friend David Studebaker do an album recording. I was trying to figure it out. That came up. Then I listened to your album and I was like, oh my gosh, this dude's a genius. And then I started repeating "Applesauce Daddy" everywhere that I went, and the weird with me voice.
Yeah.
But
The tech side of recording, I can't give any. I'm not probably super great at that part of it, so I don't want to like give any direct advice on like what mics to use or
no,
whatever.
not like that. But what I'm saying is the things that they need to be planning for in that process, because it's not just get on stage, have someone record audio. What there is a planning process for this, and what is that process? Like, how do you plan that all out?
Oh yeah, well, I always tell people to book a show at the biggest venue they can fill for an album, and or smaller. Like
Right, because
if
it's
you,
not.
yeah, you want. I would rather like when I did my special, it was I think like a 40-seat capacity room because I'm like I know I can fill that. The special that I did was like it was a very personal topic. Like I was worried enough about the show. I didn't want to worry about ticket sales. But then the album, it was a 200-seat theater that we filled, and you can clearly tell the difference in sound from one to the other. But I would rather do a show for like a sold out 50-room theater than 50 people in a 100-seat. But I think you really have to like have like a solid hour of material because you're going to cut some stuff out. Like you might mess something up and it doesn't work or it doesn't get the response you want, so you have to trim some things. And then like as it gets down, if you end up with like a 33-minute final cut, then it's a long feature set, not really an album. Do multiple shows if you can, but also like run that hour before you do the show, like as an hour. Don't just do 10-minute sets. Like if you do 6 10-minute sets and you just break up the hour that way, that's not the same, because like the audience energy, like if you're just doing 10-minute sets, you have to win them over and close every time, and like it messes the pacing, I think, of a longer set. So I was lucky because I was doing colleges before then, so like I had the chance to do the hour a couple of times, and then just I knew enough venues that would do me a favor and let me like headline a Thursday or Wednesday night.
Awesome. And then Ricky, real quick, because I know Glenn has to run in a minute. What did you do to prepare for the album as well?
I had actually recorded my dry bar special in September, which was an abbreviated version of my album, which ended up only being about a 25-minute show. And besides that, just headlining almost every show that I did for almost 2 years, a year and a half. It's hard though, because I mean, for me, as Glenn said earlier, like not having anxiety or a ton of nervousness before going up on stage and talking in the mic. Yeah, I've never had stage fright. I've never like been like, oh, I'm gonna have to go to the bathroom on stage, or like I'm so nervous. The one thing is with an album, I think it was different than the dry bar taping, which there's 2 shows for that too. I know that it's all audio, and I think I was definitely more nervous and more aware of what I thought the laughs sounded like, or the amount there were during the album. And I don't know, I mean, this could be just me being the performer's, I think, always the biggest critic. I don't know that it's my best performance. I could hear a little bit of, not desperation in my voice, but thinking
I think you did great. The second show, we talked about blaming the audience. I blame at least one table of that audience for sure.
Oh my gosh, it's a good thing the first show was good. The first show was good and fine, and yeah, I did fine. Whatever. I'm like I said, more of a critic of myself. But yeah, that second show, oof, half the audience, because the first show, as Glenn said, it was like a 60-person seater, 50-person. It was sold out, even though there seemed to be some empty space. That I felt like they could have packed it in a little bit more for an album. That's not a slide against the venue. It's just being overly critical and being like wanting to pack it out as much as possible and get the sardines in there to make it as ruckus as possible. But then the second show was like 30 people, 35 people. And I don't know why they came to a comedy show, and they knew it was an album recording too.
About half the people were there to see a show, and the other half I just think wanted to sit down somewhere
and get a drink.
Yeah,
but they need money.
But no, I think we used one joke from the second show to replace something you messed up the first one, but it's mostly that first show.
I misspoke. I said emancipated instead of emaciated,
which means very different things.
Yeah,
but I do have to go.
Yes.
So thank you for having me. I'm just at Glen Tickle on all media, and the label is Circus Trapeze Records, which I believe is circustrapeze.com.
I'll check it out. I'll make sure I add it in the notes. And then Ricky, where can people find you at?
At Ricky Glore on Twitter and Facebook.com/Ricky Glore Comedy.
Awesome. And then they both have specials. Check them out. They're on iTunes. Is your album out yet? Not yet, right?
Not yet. I think probably within the next 2 months.
I was literally gonna click leave meeting, but then I felt like on that question, because I talked about dragging my feet on some stuff.
No, Glenn's doing fine. I've heard a cut of it. So I mean, it exists, and like anything that's going on now, like my jar clips got released after all this craziness. So like this, it's all cuckoo bananas. We don't know if live shows are going to still exist.
Yeah, it's like madness. But I think May sometime. Yeah, I don't remember if we picked a specific.
And I'll link your albums, and I'll link your dry bar special and everything in this. Thank you both for being on here. Thank you both for sharing the information, and I appreciate it. And have a wonderful evening.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
Thank you, James.
Thanks. Thanks, Ricky.